Thank you and welcome to FCA International's October Safety Call. The purpose of these calls is to provide information and work to create a community of safety professionals in the signatory finishing industry. Earlier this month, FCA introduced a site-specific safety plan template to its safety product offerings for contributing FCA members. FCA's safety products can be requested from the FCA Safety Resources page at finishingcontractors.org or email us at safetyhelpline@finishingcontractors.org. All right, we will have our presentation and then time at the end for any questions, but feel free to speak up along the way. This is your call. And now we welcome Rich Martin, a safety professional with OnPoint. Thanks for being with us today, Rich.
Thank you for the intro, John. Just to confirm, we are seeing the title screen for the presentation, correct?
Correct.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. The topic of under consideration this month is flammable liquid storage and emergency preparedness at your sites, October of 2025. As John referenced, the FCA Safety Helpline is available at safetyhelpline@finishingcontractors.org and by phone at 844-414-SAFE. Your questions will be, your calls will be returned, your questions will be responded to, and we will do everything we can to assist you in maintaining and developing the safety culture at your organization. This slide here, if you want to screen grab it, I'll hold it for a couple more seconds. It'll also show up again at the end of the presentation. All right. This is an example of some of the toolbox talks that we build and provide for FCA. They are available to you through the organization. And this is a newer toolbox talk. I believe it should be available by the time we do this meeting here. But the topic of discussion is fuel storage. Knowing that construction workers very often use fuel-powered equipment, from your cutoff saws to pumps to generators, all kinds of equipment gets used with gasoline and diesel-powered fuel. And even if you don't use it directly, there will be that kind of equipment being operated in the area. So workers do face a high risk of exposure to flammable liquids, not just fuels. You guys, especially doing painting, you have your thinners and your solvents and some of the paints themselves that are also high risk of fire. So it is timely. It is October. It's Fire Prevention Month, and so there we go. In order to maintain safety related to flammable liquids, and we're not just talking about fuel here, but remember that those containers need to be stored in a manner to protect from damage, spilling, and fire. Usually that means that those fuels, at the very least, need to be stored in the container that they came in. Often some flammable liquids may get transferred to a different container, smaller one for sharing around the work site, to just leftovers. Why do I need a 5-gallon drum of this when I can put it in a half-gallon container? But we do need to make sure that those containers are the correct type of container for the flammable liquid in question. When we are storing flammable liquids indoors, remember that outside fire you can run away from, right? And if the outside fire is, if the flammables are positioned far enough away from critical infrastructure, the building you're working in, vehicles, equipment, material storage, we have plenty of time to just let that fire burn until the fire department comes to put it out. Indoors is a little bit different because it's an encapsulated, enclosed area. So the standard has been established that any flammable liquids in excess of 25 gallons must be stored in an approved fire-resistive cabinet or container. And the standard says it must be at least 10 minutes of fire resistance. So if in the unlikely event that a fire occurs inside the cabinet, you have 10 minutes to figure it out, evacuate the area, maybe begin firefighting efforts. If the fire occurs outside, of course, the inside flammable contents are protected for at least 10 minutes from that fire. Large quantities of flammable liquids, for example, gasoline or kerosene, more than 60 gallons, must be stored in a fire-resistant storage room, and diesel fuel more than 120 gallons, the same. So the solution to that is, well, how about we don't store that amount of flammable liquids inside the structure? We'll find a fuel pile outside in a safe area where we can keep those quantities. When we are looking at portable fuel containers, remember those containers must be no more than 5 gallons in capacity, must be made of fire-resistant construction. They must have a means of venting pressure. Usually that's a spring-loaded self-closing lid or spout. As the container is exposed to heat, including direct sunlight, pressure inside the container builds up, and we want that valve, that spring-loaded lid or a relief valve, to be able to vent that excess pressure so that the container doesn't swell and start to leak. And then there also must be a flame arrestor screen in there that breaks up the fire if it is exposed to the vapor space within the container. On the right, you'll see the red diamond, which is the Global Harmonization System, GHS, or the Hazard Communication Recommended and Established by OSHA label for anything flammable. So a campfire with a line under it means flammable. An O on fire means oxidizer. Very often people get those two mixed up. Here's an example of a flammable storage container containing paint sprayers, cans of paint, spray cans of paint, solvents down at the bottom, it looks like. So this is an engineered container designed to protect the contents from exposure to heat from outside. Remember too that it only works if the doors are closed, so they should be equipped with self-closing and latching doors. Those doors should not be modified or propped open for ease of access. Take a look at the safety measures down there. 60 gallons of category 1, 2, or 3 flammable liquids can be stored in any one cabinet. And you can have no more than 3 cabinets in one area. So category 1 includes pentane, diethyl ether, heptane. Category 3, you start getting down to the kinds of fluids that you might see more commonly: xylene, naphtha, turpentine, other solvents. So the recommendation is only keep on hand the minimum quantity you need for that shift or for that day. Any bulk storage should be kept in an area that, if it catches on fire, well, we're not too worried about it. Fire department can handle it. Remember that outdoor storage areas must also be well ventilated and positioned at least 20 feet away from buildings, so we should not have a fuel pile or a fuel tank or a fuel pod within 20 feet of a building. When we're storing flammables, you can see here at this location, there's a whole bunch of 5-gallon buckets. You can see the flammable liquids labeling on them, and they're just stored there in the middle of the floor. You can see a desk cubicle area in the background, a chair. So this is not just a fuel storage area. This is a processing area, a management area. So this would be inappropriate storage of flammable liquids here. You can also see it's not on pallets, so it's not like the shipment had just been drop shipped to the area. This is where it's being stored. Flammable liquids must be stored in the original container, or at the very least, a compatible container that you're going to transfer it to. Those containers must be stored protected from damage. So we don't want them in an area where they're going to be tripped over, where they're going to be kicked around, where they're going to be hit by equipment, maybe punctured by a forklift. We need to make sure that these are protected from damage. Also secured from falling. You can see the one barrel. Let's see if this cursor works. So we have a barrel right here being stacked on top of other barrels. Bumping up against this could cause it to fall, damaging something else, or the container could become damaged. Any areas where fuels are being stored, remember, flammable liquids are highly volatile, which means they want to turn into a vapor very rapidly. And vapor is what burns. So the more vapors you have in the area, the more flammable risk you have. So well-ventilated area, a lot of fresh air coming in. The other concern, of course, is that most of these flammable liquids have toxic or uh, narcotic or narcotic effects that may affect the way you think, the way you react, your decision-making processes. So we don't want to be breathing all kinds of vapors and becoming stupid just because our brain is now affected by the fumes, vapors rather. Keep them away from heat sources. That includes direct heaters, torpedo heaters, electric heaters. Keep them away from hot work. So anything where an ignition source is being generated, welding, cutting, grinding, any one of those activities could lead to the starting of a fire or even an explosion. Again, more than 25 gallons must be stored within a flammable liquids cabinet. Each cabinet should not be storing more than 60 gallons, and remember, no more than 3 cabinets in one area. These cabinets must be stored away from exit stairways and safe passages, because if they are affected by fire and that's the way to get out, you're putting people who are trying to evacuate the building at greater risk of harm. Hierarchy of controls is the method that we use to protect workers from hazards. This is basic for safety professionals, but sometimes a good reminder, a good review is just, good to remind. Elimination of the hazard, of course, is the best way to protect workers from the hazard. No hazard, no harm, right? Substitution is the next best way. If you think of, I think it's Safety Clean, the environmental cleanup company. They used to do cleaning with toxic chemicals, and they said, hey, we're exposing all our workers to these toxic chemicals. They actually started up their own laboratory process to develop chemicals that can do the same work but reduce toxic exposure. So think of more environmentally friendly, green friendly, less exposure to health and wellness, and also in many cases less expensive. Engineering controls would be the next step. This is what we most commonly see at construction sites. For example, guardrails around a fall hazard of greater than 6 feet is an example of an engineering control. We can't eliminate the hazard, but we can protect workers from the hazard by putting up those barrier guards. A guard on a grinder is another example of an engineering control. Also, administrative controls. We have here a flammable oily rags container. So this is an engineering control that allows you to store those flammable rags for a period of time and reduce the risk of a spontaneous combustion. We discussed that either last year or the year before. But you also see here an administrative control posted on this can. Remember that these cans need to be emptied every night. They need to be taken outside and the rags properly dried and disposed of. Finally, we get to PPE. PPE is what you wear after you've done everything else, and you cannot completely eliminate the hazard. The PPE is there to protect you from oversights or just those, who knew type incidents that happen. Very often in construction, PPE is the first thing workers think of, but safety professionals know that safety is a lot deeper than safety first signs, safety first t-shirts, and hard hats, safety glasses, protective footwear, and high-vis clothing. And you know it. If you look at any construction site and you see people operating with grinders and they don't have a face shield on, or cutting concrete and they're not using water methods to suppress silica dust. Very often workers don't think too much about safety beyond PPE unless it is constantly pushed and reinforced to them. This is an example of a spontaneous combustion that occurred indoors. You can see here a bunch of clean shop rags, and over here was a bucket with the oily shop rags, and they did spontaneously combust and start up this charring on the plywood before they were able to get it out of there. So that's why those cans with the self-closing lids, steel cans, are there to protect for just this thing. All right, our next toolbox talk, flammable liquid fuels. Some characteristics of fuels. Fuel vapors are heavier than air, and they tend to collect in low-lying areas. So if you are doing air monitoring, remember that air monitoring is not just going to be at waste level. You want to test high, waste, and low. And in this case, most flammable liquids tend to be heavier than air. Gasoline will form flammable vapors at minus 45 degrees Fahrenheit. So there's almost no situation, no weather situation you're going to run into where gasoline will not burn. Can just take a spark to get it lit. And then don't forget that gasoline and some of these other chemicals aren't just flammable. If you look at this GHS label over here for gasoline, you can see that it's flammable. It's an irritant, which means if you get it on your skin, it can cause skin irritation or skin burning. It has narcotic effects, so if you breathe it, it can affect your mental processes. This one here indicates that it's a health hazard, including carcinogenic. So if you get into reading more of the small print, you'll find out that gasoline is much more harmful than just being flammable. Once again, those portable fuel containers, a reiteration of the characteristics of the can, and that these kinds of storage must be kept at least 20 feet away from potential ignition sources, and also 20 feet away from more than 60 gallons, at least 20 feet away from buildings. Some safety tips. Anytime you're refilling the containers, inspect them for damage. The picture shows one that took quite a beating in the back of a truck because it was rolling around in the back. Other things were rolling around in the back and hitting it. Inspect them every time you fill them up. If you see significant damage or you see moisture build up around the welded seams or edges. Also note the spot welds where the handle attaches to the top of the can. As the interior liquid is evaporating, you might start seeing sweating in those areas. Tilt the can slightly to see if any fuel drips out of the spout. If it does, the lid may be out of alignment or the gasket material may have been damaged or disappeared. We need to get those replaced if there's any damage. Proper GHS labeling. When you're filling the cans, that's the time to look at the GHS labeling. Is it present? Is it intact? Is it legible? If it isn't, time to replace it. I like the plastic laminated GHS label cards that have the little hole in it where you can zip tie the label to the handle. They're much easier to replace. They tend to take less damage than stickers that are on the sides of the can that end up getting scraped up every time they rub up against something. Plus, in order to get those stickers to stick to the can properly, you have to prep the can, clean it thoroughly so that the sticker actually sticks. So if you use those laminated cards that zip tie onto the handle, it's much easier to replace and maintain. Take your storage containers, make sure that you try to keep them in the shade, away from direct sunlight. Try to avoid keeping them in containers, cabinets, like your truck, where there's no ventilation. Also, I've seen contractor vans, the full body vans, where the guy's sitting in front driving, and in the back he has solvents and thinners and flammable liquids and caulks and things. And you stick your head in the passenger window to talk to the driver and you can't breathe, and he's just sitting there going, what? So how do you drive in this at 2 o'clock in the afternoon when you're tired, you're already sleepy, and you're breathing all of these fumes and vapors? It is not a good idea to transport those kinds of materials in the same compartment in which the driver is driving. Let's see, protect them from damage, shut down running equipment and allow it to cool before pouring. Very often a machine shuts down, equipment shuts down because it ran out of gas. And the first thing we do is start filling it up again. And if we splash hot gas on a hot muffler, you could have a flash fire there. So do let the equipment cool down before you just start pouring the gas again. Anytime you're refilling the containers, you bring your truck over to the filling station. remember to take those containers out of the truck, place them on the ground. Trucks now, of course, they have the Rhino liner or the Line-X liner, the spray-in bed liners. They have the plastic liners. Those cans need to be grounded because as fluid is transferring from the pump into the can, it can create a static electricity charge, which could cause a spark. It's not common, but it has happened, and that's why we need to make sure the cans are on the ground when we're refilling them. Inside of a fuel container, you can see the metal fire-resistant construction. You can see the flame arrestor screen here. Here's your self-closing lid and spout. So no larger than 5 gallons, fire-resistant construction, self-closing or venting lid or spout, and there's your flame arrestor screen. That's what it looks like from the inside. What the flame arrestor screen does is it breaks up any fire that may be burning the vapors coming out of the can, preventing it from going down into the can and creating an explosion hazard in there. 1 gallon of gas has the explosive potential of up to 14 sticks of dynamite. Liquid can flow out, screen dissipates to prevent an explosion due to flashback flames. Sometimes people will take these screens out. By the way, notice how deep it is. You can see here that there's plenty of room for a fuel nozzle, right? A lot of guys will take these screens out, dig them out, because they say, I need to be able to put the filler tube in there. If they take them out, they should put them back in, but they really should not take them out. Yeah, there you go. So sometimes these are removed to facilitate refilling the container. Don't do that, or make sure it's replaced when done. Here's an example of a common fuel container you'll see on a site. So you've got the 5-gallon jerry can, screw-on lid. You've got the little vent there that you pop open so the thing flows smoothly when you're tilting. You have to put in the nozzle. When this is in place and you tip the can over, fuel will just continue spilling out of this nozzle. So we're good. We're no larger than 5 gallons. It's fire-resistant construction. We do not have a self-closing venting lid or spout, nor do we have the flame arrestor screen, which, by the way, is often in here in the spout. If this gets lost, people will just pour gasoline out of the big hole, splashing it. But we got 2 strikes against us already. So no good. There's another one you commonly see on the construction site. This is, yes, it's less than 5 gallons, but it is not fire-resistant construction, does not have a self-closing lid or spout, does not have a flame arrestor screen. So if you see these on your sites, get rid of them, replace them with the proper containers. Remember, they're color-coded by design. This is not a requirement, but this is just a standard that you will find. Red is gasoline, yellow diesel, blue kerosene, green for oils. The other day I saw a red gasoline can, and on top with yellow spray paint and stencils, they put diesel up there. Well, if the diesel marking gets scraped off or it gets dirty and occluded, or somebody's just not paying attention, and we start mixing fuels, we don't have the correct GHS information on it, that can be a problem. So please don't mix your different fuel types in an incorrectly colored can. So there's your GHS labels and just examples: diesel, yellow, red gasoline, blue kerosene. Back of a truck, we see an issue here, right? We've got a can taking a beating. We have a can over here that's tipped over. Is it empty? If it's empty, is it empty because it leaked out because it was laying on its side? Or did it just get tossed in there like that because it was empty? You don't know. But either way, you can see that the truck has a lot of stuff to roll around back here. These containers should be stored in a manner that protects them from damage. There's your GHS label. This is the old NFPA scoring. Note we have blue, we have yellow. The red kind of looks yellow. All right, so this is health hazard, level 1, flammability hazard, level 3, reactivity hazard, level 0, and then no other special hazard. But the red is no longer red, meaning this label needs to be replaced. This is the kind of label we should be looking at. Here we have a truck with the fuel containers in an area designated for the fuel containers, protected against damage. How do you get it out? Well, over on the right out of the picture is a little pin. Over here on the left, you have hinges. And this whole gate opens up, which is nice because now you can just pull the container out. You don't have to lift it up and over everything from the ground, thus increasing the risk of strain and sprain injuries. All right, what can be done for emergency action plans? We're going to transition now to planning for the emergency. And I may have mentioned this before, I mention it often. This is a book by Ben Sherwood called The Survivors Club. And it caught my attention on a TV show in their book segment. They had the author on, and he was talking about the question that came to him: why is it in a train crash, in the same train car, 25 people live, 25 people die? Plane crash, people living next to each other, some people live, some people die. Active shooting scenario in a theater. Why did these people become victims? Why did these people make them out? They were in the same theater, same hallways, everything. And he started evaluating, car accidents. Why do some people survive, some don't? Violent crime, train and plane crash, even things like serious illness. What about financial difficulties or even family emergencies? So it caught my attention, basically being a fireman and an emergency responder. Yeah, that's a good question, and I'm all about preparedness. So the question the author raised was, who beats the odds and who surrenders? So in this book here, they talk about, let me just double check something. Yeah, they talk about the survivors are the ones who get on the plane expecting the plane to crash, or at least expecting the possibility that there could be a problem with the plane. These are the ones that will listen to the flight attendant when they're reading the emergency instructions. They are the ones that maybe even when they bought their seats, they bought seats near exits. They paid attention, they read the card, they maybe even looked at the door to figure out how to open it in event of an emergency. Where is the big life raft stored? Where's the flotation device stored? Seat belts, how do they work? These are the ones that survive. The ones that end up not surviving are the ones who immediately plugged into their phone, plugged into their headset, put the little eye covers over their eyes and the little pillow thing around their neck, and promptly went to sleep. Maybe when they got up after it was okay to take off your seatbelt, they never put the seatbelt back on. Those are the ones who did not survive. Train crash is similar. Violent crime, theater shooters. Uh, and I used to do this with my kids. We're in the theater. Hey, kids, if we have to get out in an emergency, where are we going to go? 90% of people, when they leave a theater, they leave the way they came in. Bad guys know that. But if you sit in a theater watching a movie and you look down towards the front, you'll see exit doors on either side, or at least on one side of the movie screen up there. If you duck out through that door, you'll end up in a back hallway where you can exit the building while everybody's jamming up the main entrances. Maybe you can even guide and direct people in that theater out that door rather than heading out into the common areas. Hotel room. Every hotel room I've ever been in has a little chart on the door when you leave your hotel room that shows you where the stairways are. Pay attention to that. I used to take my kids, exit the hotel room. All right, kids, close your eyes. We're looking for the fourth door. And we'll go down the hallway and they'll feel for the fourth door. All right, find the doorknob, open it up. Okay, we're in the stairwell. Now, if there's a power outage or if there's smoke down to the floor, my kids can crawl on the floor, even if I'm not there, find that fourth door, go through it, go down to the ground floor, and then we will all meet out of the car. So a little emergency evacuation plan that you can even teach your family or kids to use when you go on vacation, just to raise that awareness. It's a good book. You plan on what you're going to do. Hey, if there's a fire, we're going to make the right turn. We're going to go 4 doors down. We're going to go down the stairs, so on. Prepare. Preparation includes exposing people to the information they need to know. Training, because we only ever rise to the level of our training and experience. We will never rise to the occasion. And then practice it. A plan that is implemented, a plan that is discussed but is never practiced. It will not be used in moments of stress or panic. People won't even remember that there is a plan. So when we develop an emergency action plan, it needs to be more than just, if the fire alarm goes off, we're going to bail out of the building. Your emergency action plan should address Emergencies including weather. What are we going to do if there's flooding? What are we going to do if there's a hurricane coming in, tornado coming in? Fire, of course, OSHA considers that to be minimum fire and emergency evacuation. But what are we going to do in a medical emergency if we need to rescue somebody who's hanging from their fall arrest system from the boom lift? How are we going to do that? What are we going to do if there's a power outage or a utility hit or even hostile acts? And I think over the last few years, I don't know if we're seeing more hostile acts or just more news about hostile acts, but it does seem like we're more aware of them than we would be 10, 20 years ago. Your emergency action plan should include who are you going to call. Remember, not every area that you may be working in has 911. There are still some uh, less developed, more rural areas. Maybe they have volunteer fire departments and maybe even a separate ambulance medical rescue department. And you have to dial a 10-digit number, area code, exchange, and then the final four numbers. You should know who you're going to call. Here's an example of an emergency contact poster that you can put up at your sites. This is in the safety and health manual template that is available through the FCA. And here you can identify job number, job name, job address. Ask your workers, what's the address of the construction site right here? Many of them won't be able to tell you, but if they're calling 911, dispatch is going to want to know, where are we going? It would be great if they could say 123 Main Street, northwest corner. That's where you should bring the equipment. There's your numbers. You can, fire department. Is it 911? Emergency medical services? All of this might be 911. What about building security or site security? Maybe you need to call them up to let them know, hey, emergency responders are coming in. Make sure that you send them over here. If you have designated first responders, and by the way, OSHA does require you to provide first aid responders if you cannot get your injured workers emergency help within 4 to 5 minutes. And that has to do with how long it takes for your heart and your brain to have irreversible brain damage in lack of oxygen, to how long a fire transitions from the incipient stage to the free burning stage. So if you need to do CPR, people should be trained and equipped to do CPR. If someone gets a serious laceration, an artery is being cut, they can bleed out in 30 seconds. Is there someone trained to apply bandages and tourniquets and stuff until the ambulance shows up? Company supervisor down there as well. That way, if they're not there on site, you can call them up and let them know that there's a problem. How are you going to act? Are you going to act in offense? In other words, are you going to grab a fire extinguisher and run to the fire and try and put it out? Or are you going to do defense? You're going to warn everyone to get out of the building and assist in evacuating the structure. If you are going to evacuate, where are you going to meet? Everybody from Joe's finishing contractors, we're going to meet on the northwest corner of the building, right by the traffic light. You have a designated meeting place. Who's going to make sure everyone is there? Usually it's going to be the foreman or the supervisor. And who are we going to notify? Well, maybe we need to notify emergency services. Maybe that's already been done, but it probably would be a good idea to notify your supervisor back at the office, the company owner, the safety manager for your company, so that they're not finding out about it on the news. Here's an example of an emergency action plan, similar to what you might find on the inside of a hotel door. This is a very, very basic emergency evacuation plan, focusing mostly on evacuation, but you can see here in case of fire, I hope you can see this. It looks like it faded out too quickly, but in case of fire, number one, report to whom? 911, here's a cell phone number. Where are we going to evacuate? Reminder, don't use elevators, follow evacuation procedures, proceed to your assembly point. And then there's a building map that shows you how to get out of the building. How are you going to notify people? Maybe the fire alarm system in the building's working. Maybe it's still in the process of being installed. Some people use one of these compressed air horns and prearranged signals. Maybe 3 blasts means evacuate the building. So 3 blasts, wait, 3 blasts, wait, and so on. Maybe 5 blasts means panic and dive out of every window. Who knows? But pre-established warning so that people know 2 blasts is a medical. I'm a first aid provider. I'm going to grab the first aid kit and help out. There's that emergency contact poster again. Response actions. What are you going to do for critical operations? If there is an emergency, are we just going to leave everything running? Some things maybe need to be shut down and made safe before you just walk away from it. So we need to identify what those critical operations are and do the appropriate steps in the process of evacuation. How are we getting out? Construction sites tend to be very dynamic. Doorways that used to exist are now walled over, or new paths to egress must be established because, hey, they just, put that lining on top of that floor over there and we can't go walking on that floor. Well, how are we going to get out? So the paths to exit need to be labeled and signed, and the exits themselves need to be labeled and signed. And if you have fire extinguishers, they should be static, and a system of letting people know where the fire extinguishers are should also be indicated. Here's an evacuation route map for this project here. The red star informs this particular company that this is where we're going to meet if we have to evacuate the building. Notice that it's back here instead of here where all the emergency equipment's going to be showing up. So we don't want to be in the way. We don't want to be hanging out over here watching the show. This may not be the best location depending on whether or not a hazardous material is involved. So if we have wind direction traveling this way, maybe pushing hazardous material, vapor clouds or fumes towards us, we might have to assess at the time of an emergency, and maybe we need to be over here instead. So remember that this is great as a starting point, but it may have to adapt depending on conditions. A lot of construction sites will have a safety board, an emergency actions board here. You can see here we have who to call in the event of an emergency. We have the address of the location, 2372 West Indian Trail in Aurora. So if you have to call 911, you can tell them where to come. Here we have some emergency maps telling you how to get to the occupational clinic for minor emergencies and checkouts, and maybe the emergency room for something more serious. We have a fire extinguisher, we have first aid kit, we have eye wash kits. Often you will see a PPE station here where you can get hearing protection and safety glasses, maybe for visitors to the site. Here's your SDS book. There's your employee rights. So if you are a general contractor, a superintendent, and you're running the show, it's a good idea to put up maybe one at the entrance, but maybe others at strategic locations throughout the facility as well, depending on the size of the facility. One of our contractors, an electrical contractor, has a job box like this. Notice that you have your first aid kit here, fire extinguisher here, eye wash kit here, and it's ready to go. You can keep it locked up to secure everything else. In fact, at the end of the day, you can take these items and you can lock them up inside the case as well so that they don't disappear. But during hours of operation, they are here ready to go. Inside, they have, equipment, plans, guides, other, I think in here they keep their fall arrest equipment. So it's well protected and available for use. You've made it out of the building, we've evacuated, now what do we do? Remember, planning and preparation is what's gonna, get you to survive rather than becoming a victim. So employees should all know that they're to report to the muster assembly location. A responsible person should do an accountability check, not just, I know I have 5 people, but do I have the same 5 people that I should have? Because the 5 people you had yesterday may not be the 5 people you have today. So the person should know who to account for. It's especially important when you're bringing in extra workers or replacement worker from the hall, and maybe you didn't see them yesterday, you may not see them tomorrow, but they're there for you today. Workers should stay in that assembly location until released. Once you've done the accountability check, if it looks like the show is going to go on for a while, You can release people to go wait in their cars or trucks, or depending on, the needs of your business, maybe even say, you know what, we're done for the day here. You can go home, or we're done for the day here. I want you guys to go over to this site and help them out over there, but never go back into the building until you get the all clear from the emergency responders and the supervisor. Follow the directions and instructions of emergency services providers. A good emergency service provider will recognize that you guys are the experts on the scene of the facility, the site, the location, and also the circumstances. So they will usually invite someone to join them in their command structure to help them make decisions. But if they are making decisions, don't argue with them. Don't tell them how to do their job. That's a great way to get the officers to escort you to a safe location. Once you're done exercising your emergency action plan, you have to evaluate and adjust that plan. Did it work, or was it a total disaster? If it was a total disaster, we may need to rewrite the whole plan. If there were things that happened that were not addressed in the plan, it's time to add it into the plan. And if there were things that didn't work, then we need to adjust that plan so that we're ready next time. Remember, your muster location must take into account things like weather. It's 105 degrees outside and there's no shade. Where are you going to shelter? Where are you going to hang out? Or it's 10 below with a 10-mile-an-hour wind. Are we going to stand here back at this corner back here, freezing our butts off? Or are we going to maybe go to the next facility and say, hey, can we shelter in your location till this show is over? So remember, we have to adapt. Storm activity as well. The location you're working in may not be a great place to shelter in. So have a plan for that. Capacity. I was brought into a location to evaluate their emergency preparedness for a tornado. What do they have enough shelter for their tornado? And they made a valiant effort, but they forgot about the fact that during the day they have 300 employees. And when they added up the square footage of all of the designated shelter locations, they could only shelter about 100 of them. So, we had to have a plan on pick and choose, who's gonna stay and who's gonna fly away. No, we helped them develop a plan for adding in temporary shelters. They can be made with Connex boxes. What is it? Fermilabs. They have something like 12-foot concrete pipes they have set into the ground about 12 inches. They're floored so that they have a flat floor, and they constructed buildings out of these concrete pipes so that they can shelter their people in a tornado. What do you do with the hazardous materials incident? Sometimes you have to shelter in place. Sometimes you have to get out of there. You definitely have to get out of there if you're looking at explosives and toxics. But sometimes to exit the building, you have to go through a toxic cloud. That would be bad. So sometimes you might have to seal up the windows with plastic, turn off all the HVAC systems, and just stay in the building until you have an all clear. But here's your different hazards that OSHA has identified. There's your explosive, flammable, oxidizer, corrosives, poison/toxics, irritants. So that could be anything from allergic reactions to coughing and sneezing to narcotic effects. We have compressed gases. We have health effects, primarily carcinogens, but could be anything from birth defects to mutagens and so on. So these are the 8 established by OSHA. This is an optional one that is governed by DOT to let you know that the chemicals, fuels, liquids that you're messing with, if improperly maintained, could cause environmental damage. If you do have a hazardous materials incident, remember uphill, upwind, and as far away as possible are your best plans. Uphill if it's a liquid, because you don't need that liquid flowing down towards you. Upwind so that the wind is blowing the hazardous vapors or fumes or plumes or clouds away from you. And then distance, especially toxics, explosives, radioactives, the further away you are, the better off you're going to be. So we deal with propane, right? We have heaters, we have propane equipment that's being used on the construction site. Propane is very flammable. It is also a not a flammable, well, it's a flammable liquid inside the container, but once it's released from the container, it immediately turns to a vapor. And that vapor has a tendency to hug low-lying areas in the ground. So you want to be uphill and upwind of a propane leak and as far away as possible. We deal with thinners, paints, other processes in the area may expose you to hazardous materials. So it's a good idea to maybe when you do your orientation, when you get on a site, identify what hazardous materials are in use on the site and address those in your emergency action plan as well.
Well, that was lots of great stuff, Rich, and I can't imagine anybody better than you to present it. So thank you very much for that.